Dungeon of Trials, one of the hardest modes in all of Grand Summers, regarded as probably the hardest mode actually in all of GS. And I have conquered it only once. I've got all the way up to stage 30, but they have added a brand new stage about a few months ago, I think, that was stage 31. But not only did they add stage 31, they also added the Ascended characters, right? We are in a whole new era of Grand Summoners. So I want to see if it was just as bad as it was back then, or if it's even a little bit easier, or maybe too easy nowadays when going through the Dungeon of Trials. And here's what I'll tell you about what I experienced. Stage 1 through 20, extremely easy. As long as you have good units built and you have some equips farmed on your account and possibly even some gacha equips, you should be able to clear stage 1 through 20 no problem whatsoever. Stage 21 through 31. Yeah, Ascended characters made this a joke. One thing I realized going through the entirety of DOT now was how easy it felt. As someone who has a lot of different Ascended characters, it made me realize that the game is not progressing fast enough for these kind of characters. There were some floors where I couldn't use Ascended characters on, like 26, Ignis. We'll talk about her in a second. But for a lot of these different floors, I was able to utilize an Ascended character, and it just made it so much easier. Miyu, surprisingly, was my MVP throughout my entire DOT run. She was able to counter so much of what the game was throwing at me. She was literally the answer to so many things, and she dealt so much damage so quickly, I never had to worry about any kind of boss even dealing DPS to me, because I noticed as well, a lot of Dungeon Trials bosses don't even have like threshold gates, you know, where you deal damage and once you get to the threshold, it just stops you and you can't deal any more damage. Yeah, a lot of DOT bosses don't have that mechanic. It seems like they would, but they actually don't. Even the big bad one herself, Ignis, doesn't have this mechanic because you're able to nuke her with a team like this. So whenever I got to use my Ascended characters, it was completely overkill for so many stages. I was going through it, taking my time and just relaxing through so many of these Dungeon Trials floors. Some of the hardest content in the game was now some of the easiest. Then I got to floor 26, and this one is still just as difficult. As I mentioned before, you can nuke this boss, and if you can, I would recommend you just do that, because I feel like that is the easier thing to do instead of going a sustain route like me and taking forever to do it and failing about 10 minutes in, even though the timer says 4 minutes, but you know, it's really like 10 minutes IRL, since the units are stopping and pausing the game every single time they use their true arts or their arts or whatever else. This one took me a while. I don't know how many attempts it was, but I'll put it up on screen right now. Goddamn. I was here for like an hour. Ignis is still ridiculously hard. And it's more so just because how this stage is crafted and how Hellfire is so potent even with a character like Mizuki on your team. I think that this stage will get easier over time, especially if we get a Ascended character that has a Hellfire passive. Then it definitely might be over for Ignis at that point. But for right now, this is still extremely difficult unless you have the nuke comp to do it. I probably have the nuke comp to do it. I could have probably nuked it, but I just chose not to. Ignis is still truly the boss of DOT because no one else after this is as hard as Ignis. So once I cried and got beat and blasted by Ignis so many times, I was able to finally get a dub on her and win against her. Which means I moved on to stage 27, 28, you know, list goes on. And these stages weren't too bad either. Pretty much all these stages after this point were easy. The only other one that gave me somewhat of a problem was stage 29, because we had to deal with miasma, and you have to poison this boss and break the boss, and you can't use archgeners or any type of crazy overtime healers pretty much, so you kind of just have to rely on Gerald to tank everything, Sandstone to help mitigate stuff, and then Sestina and Pola to deal most of the damage. This one is time consuming more so than anything else, but still, you know, not too bad. The last two stages, which is against Mars X for 30, and then 31 is against the boy Og, 30 isn't too bad. It's mainly a DPS race. It takes a little bit for you to get the timing down, but as long as you have really good DPS characters and good supporters on the team, you shouldn't have an issue beating Mars X. It's more so timing than anything else, especially if your characters are Ascended, like War God Finn, Miyu, all of them. And in the final stage against Og, revolves around a mechanic where he actually becomes immune at each threshold to whoever's dealing the most damage. He will also target whoever is dealing the most damage and gain, you know, various buffs against them, like crit rate, damage up, you know, the usual stuff. But even him, he doesn't have a lot of HP. He goes down really easily. And after I did all this, I was like, wow, that wasn't worth it. I originally did all of this for 3 hours. Also, I recorded my commentary with all of it for 3 hours. And guess what happened to it? I lost it all. But this left me very empty, I guess. very wishful for something more. This is one of the most challenging modes in all of Grand Summoners, and it was so easy that I didn't even really feel anything once I beat it. And the rewards just are so meaningless, which is the argument that I have every single time whenever I do DOT, is that I always feel like I'm just wasting my time. There's no reason for me to waste so much time and so much effort and so much energy on these stages when I'm mainly just doing them for a crystal or for me to get the LB stones. Everything from stage 21 to like 30 isn't worth it. You get a unit that you don't use. Thankfully, you at least get a crystal too, so they make it somewhat worth it, at least in the summon department. And in stage 31, you finally get some that you could actually use, and maybe this would make you want to play this. You get a luck gem. I'm hoping that every stage beyond this will just reward a luck gem as well, or possibly they tie the ascended LB stones to DOT or something to give this some more presence in the game. Because for right now, man, it just feels so unrewarding. Not only does it feel unrewarding, it doesn't feel challenging anymore, which isn't its fault. These stages came out 8 months ago. Stage 31 was here when I attempted DOT the last time, and it still has not been updated. It is almost a year, ladies and gentlemen, a year later, and Dungeon Trials is still only at floor 31. And even on JP, it hasn't progressed that much either. It only goes up to stage 33. I didn't know that it was this bad in terms of challenging content in the game. It's really Summoner's Road now that does the most in terms of making you feel somewhat challenged at having to use certain characters and equips and everything else. To be honest, I get gapped more in Summoner's Road because of my equips than I do in DOT, which makes me feel like that at some point we're gonna have to get a renewed Dungeon of Trials, which is maybe the Ascended Dungeon of Trials, or we're just gonna have to get a whole new mode to even challenge these characters, because a lot of these Ascended characters are so freaking good and so strong. It makes some of the content that was the hardest content we ever seen in the game trivial. So yeah, I conquered DOT again, this time beating all the way up to floor 31, and I feel like I wasted my time. I wouldn't recommend you guys do this at all. Even if you want the luck gem at the end, I just don't think it's worth it. Even if you want to try to experience the stages, you know, you think it's gonna be fun, go on ahead, but it's just a time sink for no reason, with no meaningful reward or anything waiting for you. Tell me down below what you guys think about all this, you know. I would love to hear your opinions, your comments, and all that type of stuff. Pretty much let me know all your thoughts down below in the comment section. You guys already heard mine. Love to hear all of yours. And if you enjoyed this video, check out either one of the videos popping on your screen right now. Maybe my first DOT attempt or this one where I cleared it last time. They're both pretty good videos. Oh, and one more thing before I leave. Don't forget to drink water.